Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're starting a brand new fanfic, which is what if Naruto encountered a red-haired Uzumaki girl after losing everything. Part 1. If you enjoy this story, please like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want a part 2. Now, let's begin the fanfic. Mito Uzumaki took a calming deep breath of the magnificent air around her. The fragrance of the various amounts of flowers, along with the colorful flower of lilies, the lilacs and the sweet-scented lavenders filled her senses. She heard the distant waves of the sea clashing against the shores, the cheerful singing of the birds that flew from tree to tree as well as the leaves crashing against one another from the help of the wind. She felt the grass blades that ran through her right hand, the pleasant heat of the morning bright sun that hit her skin, the smooth breeze that ran through her vibrant red hair. She usually tied it up in buns, but this was the exception. Her own hair wasn't long, it just reached her shoulders, at least compared to other Uzumakis. She usually came here to relax, her own personal meadow that only she knew about. Nearly a 2-hour walk away from Uzushiogakure, a recent village that hardly had a 4-month lifespan, but one of the very first of its kind. A ninja village. She took in another breath. She had found this meadow weeks after when construction began. While Mito was more calm and composed compared to other Uzumakis, she did enjoy satisfying her curiosity. She thought a bit of her childhood. But perhaps she was a bit too curious since she did get into trouble when she was younger. Her walks in and around the village were frequent. She found that it was more enjoyable when the elements were around. Like rain or snow that would cover the landscape, it sort of added a different aura when it wasn't. Originally, she had found her personal area when a light layer of snow coated it. When spring had came in, she was pleasantly surprised to find various species of flowers blooming. Now she frequently visited here to relieve stress and to simply relax. Being an exceptional sensory type, she would make sure that no one would follow her, going as far to suppress her own chakra. She stood up from where she sat, making sure to brush off any grass off her kimono. Her white garb was intricate, a white high-collared kimono with an obi tied around her waist, the Uzumaki crest the back of the obi. She walked around the daisies making sure ever so to take a moment to take in the fragrances of different plants. Her life was fairly mild now, ever since they had ended their she had to admit dangerous nomadic lifestyle. It was that she much preferred to travel and to see new sights. She admitted to herself that it was the only thing she missed. That life ended when Konohagakure was formed by the Uchiha and Senju clan and their village was formed by the recommendation of the Senju clan, whom they always had close ties with. She thought about Hashirama, she sighed, she was a bit enamored with the clan leader. Perhaps it had something to do with his personality, which carried a unpredictability she found interesting. She would have thought that the power he wielded would have given him an arrogant personality, but she had found that she was wrong. Since their villages had close ties, frequent village visits were common. The visits were composed of groups. Whenever she had the chance, she would always traverse to Konoha, usually to satisfy her curiosity of a different place since greatly enjoyed discovering new things. Except she greatly enjoyed a place to come back to sleep, something that she enjoyed to sleep privately. Now whenever she went to the village it was usually to see the Senju clan leader, and he had very recently taken a slight interest with her. Last group she ventured out with they had a small talk that she greatly enjoyed. They were still acquaintances, and she had a growing crush on Hashirama. As she found out, Konohagakure was about a 1/3 larger than their own, with large walls and a gate that surrounded them. Their visit would last for several days, and then the trek back home would be made. At the several trips she had been on in Konoha, she had debated on staying there, but she decided not to since she wanted to explore it first, little by little to get the most out of the village. Some things are best to savor after all. She was also reluctant to move out of her home. The Uzumaki clan was like a family to her. She narrowed her brow at the sudden chakra she had felt. It seemingly appeared out of nowhere. She disregarded a sunflower that she had been looking at to focus on searching where the chakra signature was. What? Her small frustration at possibly being followed turned to confusion. She turned to the south, whereas the north contained her village. It can't possibly. She looked up in the sky, a figure falling 50 meters from the ground and some distance away from the meadow. No way. The figure quickly approached the forest. She heard the distant sounds of tree branches snapping and a muted thud when the figure hit the ground. Surely whoever that must be. She sensed that his chakra signature present, but faded into a more subdued state. She stood in her meadow in slight shock at the sudden appearance of the figure. She stood there for a few more moments before her curious nature got to her. Making sure her kimono wouldn't let up, she set a brisk pace and traversed for a few minutes to where the person fell. She got cautious as she approached closer to the site, preparing to defend herself at a possible ambush. Her ninja training had told her to return and report this to the clan, but she didn't want anyone to find the meadow or this person to possibly die from the 40-minute sprint to get to the village and back. Besides, she was told that she was one of the best kunoichi that Uzu had to offer. She approached slowly and saw numerous broken branches and fallen leaves that littered the impact site. She saw a small crater embedded in the ground. At her distance she couldn't see the person due to the depression in the ground, but they were still there. She took careful steps, making sure she would react to any sort of action. She saw a blonde young man, around her age. He had 3 whiskers on each cheek, his rough blonde hair hung over his closed eyes which was surrounded by orange eye shadow. His face devoid of any baby fat, leaving a firm jaw. He wore a orange and black jacket, its zipper partway down, letting the collar run free and showed he wore a fishnet shirt. He also wore orange pants, showing her that he preferred orange-colored clothing. Handsome. He was unconscious but somehow peacefully, despite from the height he fell from. She now stood over him, knowing he was really out of it. She deduced from the size of the crater, which was several feet deep, that he had fell even further that she saw him fall. Which confused her because he looked unharmed, other than he was unconscious. One of his hands clutched a black bag that was over his chest, no doubt to protect the contents in the bag. Dirt was strewn everywhere on him, some leaves still in wild hair. He was still alive, told by his rising chest and active chakra that still hung weakly. She looked to the sky to check of any indication of where he had fell from. I never met of anyone who could fly. She remembered hearing of a person who can, somewhere in the land of Earth. She looked back at the blonde on the ground and saw the orange marking around his eyes disappear. As that, some sort of jutsu. His chakra got noticeably weaker, but his condition showed no outward signs of change. She felt his chakra, which strongly reminded her of chakra of the Uzumaki clan possessed. She kneeled down and nudged him a few times, no response. He breathed in deeply and slow. He's definitely out of it. She had limited knowledge of anything that involved medicine. She checked him for any broken bones. After several moments into her shock, found nothing that he had anything broken. She was immensely curious about this person. Who is he? Where did he come from? Why does he have similar chakra to an Uzumaki? Why did he fall from the sky? Nonetheless, she couldn't just leave him here. She took the bag he clutched in his hand and set it aside. Preparing herself, she moved the obi on her waist, letting to tie to the side and quickly tied her hair into the buns. She stood up and slung his one-strap bag in front of her and she clumsily brought him on her back. It was clear that he was taller than she was, as his feet slightly dragged on the ground. She shifted his weight around and slouched forward so that his feet wouldn't graze the ground. She groaned that she was going to be carrying him in an uncomfortable position for a 40-minute run. He owes me cinnamon buns later. Making sure nothing was left behind, she started in a run to bring him to Uzushiogakure. Mito Uzumaki stood in front of clan leader, Shin Uzumaki. He stood at 5 feet and 10 inches, 56 years old, despite his age, and because of the life force of the Uzumakis was still considered one of the strongest in the clan. He's very knowledgeable in Fuinjutsu, one of the best. He had long white hair that reached midway of his back. He sported a thick white square goatee and mustache that slightly sagged down. He wore the usual attire for when Uzumaki went to battle. A high-collared, long-sleeved black garb with the red Uzumaki swirl on the shoulders, along with black pants, and wearing the gray armor that went down to cover the thighs, with the black sash to keep the armor in place. They were a large room decorated with various items, flowers, stands, the large Uzumaki crest that hung behind him. The building was obviously new from the recent village that was erected. Shin sat on a simple chair behind a large desk that had several papers in a pile. Mito wondered how the situation differs at Konoha, since there was several large clans. There was only one major clan, which was the Uzumaki, and several minor ninja clans that made up Uzushiogakure. It was clear what the leadership that was present here, so she wondered if the clan leaders in Konoha all convened to discuss matters concerning their village. Whatever it was obvious that such meetings would take time, unlike the matter that she had presented to her grandfather. Fell from the sky, you say? He spoke loudly. It was something most Uzumakis shared. She nodded at his question. I see. That is quite peculiar indeed. We'll wait on his medical report before we decide anything more on the matter. She nodded in agreement. She had brought back the spiky-haired blonde back to her village, straight to the large building which the clan leader resided. He was immediately brought to the infirmary to be checked out on his current status, and now she had just finished explaining on how she found him. For now, we'll see the contents that's within the bag. She approached the desk and gave him the small black bag that she found with the blonde, and he roughly dumped out its contents. She slightly cringed at the manner. What if there was something fragile? Shin quickly organized the items that had spilled out, which wasn't much. She quickly inspected the stuff. Several scrolls, ink, a calligraphy pen, a tool pouch, a shuriken holster, some rice balls, and a red cloak that had black flames patterned at the bottom. She controlled her amusement at the last two things she saw: a black and white nightcap that looked like a dog, and along with a fat green frog wallet which had some Rio spilling out. That's how I'll get my cinnamon buns. Her grandfather was less subtle. A hearty chuckle escaped from him as he looked at the nightcap. She didn't think that this person was dangerous, or at the least mean any harm to her clan. It was only one person after all. So he must be a shinobi, Mito commented. Shin nodded as he emptied the tool pouch, which contained some wire and some peculiar-looking kunai. She watched at how her grandfather picked up the kunai. It was triple-bladed with a faint yellow handle. She saw a strange formula written on the grip. What is it? She asked. It took several long moments of him inspecting the kunai before the older man answered. It seems like a formula similar to summoning. So a space-time formula. Really? So he's a fuinjutsu user then? The writing supplies had hinted that, but it didn't really confirm it. He nodded at her questioning. She was glad that she found out something about the mysterious blonde. Yes. This formula is no simple task. No doubt it needs a trigger to activate, most likely from our guest. Whoever he is quite adept in fuinjutsu, he praised him. Which had surprised Mito, since he hardly ever praises anyone. He proceeded to check through the remaining items. Some of the scrolls were blank except for one. It seems that this one holds many of the same item. He inspected the scroll and channeled some chakra. The same tri-prong kunai earlier before popped out of the scroll. How many of them? Around 300. Wow. That's quite the number, Mito commented. One of the medical ninja entered by this time. He was plain looking and forgettable. He was dressed in a doctor's uniform composed of white and smelled of antiseptic. He came to step beside her, no doubt to report on the mystery guy. Shin. He bowed in a formal manner. I came to report on our guest. The clan leader mentioned for him to continue on with his report. Anyways, he's completely fine. No injuries whatsoever, other than the case of major chakra exhaustion. But nothing can be told of his mental status as of currently. Shin nodded in understanding, knowing that they hadn't received any of the machinery to check for any brain damage yet. Nothing was found on him. Shin asked, prompting a shake of the medical nin's head. You can go. The doctor turned on his heel and walked out, the door shutting close. Mito looked back to her grandfather, who sported a contemplative look. She opened her mouth to speak, only to be interrupted by him. You said his chakra is reminiscent of Uzumaki, correct? It is. Well, I don't think that he had any plot against us. Other than the kunai he possessed, he had nothing that would pose a danger to us, he replied. He closed his eyes in a contemplative state. I know how you're, Mito. You're curious about him. She didn't respond for a moment. So, my granddaughter, I want you to watch over our guest until he awakes. Is that a mission? She asked. Yes. But since he's not a POW, think of it as community service, he replied. Uzumakis were usually optimistic, and a rowdy bunch, they were quite unusual compared to other larger clans. Like the Senju, Uchiha, or Hyuga. Although Shin did worry a little, if he turned out to be hostile, he was confident that Mito would be able to put him down. Which he believed that it wouldn't come to pass. We'll want him to be relaxed as possible when he awakes, so I think your apartment should be okay. We don't want him to feel intimidated or escape should he stay in a hospital or a prison. Shin watched her nod a little too fast for her usual behavior. He slightly chuckled as she closed the door. Mito looked at the blonde guy curiously. He was like a puzzle she was eager to solve. Her life was filled null expectation. While she had a calm demeanor compared to other Uzumaki, her curiosity had taken over. She liked unpredictability, something sudden and extravagant. Her clan was predictable in her sense. Despite being uncommon, her clan was usually optimistic about everything, but also careful. There was something lacking, she couldn't pinpoint what though, and it made her somewhat uneasy. Perhaps she needed a change in her life, something to excite it. Something foreign for her to solve, that would ease her curiosity. This wild blonde-haired teen was able to satisfy it, somewhat. He was a complicated puzzle in her mind, an anomaly. She wondered if he continued to be so, or if the puzzle would solve for her when he awoke. His sudden appearance over the sky was something of interest, so did the formula on his kunai. She couldn't lie that she was immensely curious about things she didn't understand and she usually tried to figure out the basics to it and once she figured it out, it would bore her a little. Over the course of the yesterday and today, she would occasionally watch this handsome blonde sleep in the guest room in her home. Fours and such medical equipment was present in the room, to monitor his well-being. She knew her skills as a kunoichi was being used here. Her exceptional fuinjutsu would hopefully be enough to restrain him, should he be less than friendly. She lived in a two-bedroom apartment that only she alone lived in. He slept in a mostly unused bedroom, decorated by neutral objects. Such as an Uzumaki flag, several drawers for storage, and flowers picked from her personal meadow. He slept on a plain beige bed and matching pillows and blankets. His gear that he had brought with him was laid out on a desk on the left side of the bed, his jacket under it, the side which she sat on. The door was opened behind her. After the first day, she thought that he would have awakened, but he didn't. Her fascination of this odd character continued to grow. Simply because of his chakra continued to grow stronger, and continuously did so over the next day. It was not all, his chakra seemed to rival the relaxed state of Hashirama Senju, already known as one of the most powerful shinobi to ever live. Even if she had never spoken with the unnamed blonde, her fascination continued to grow. Once again she wondered if the mystery would be solved right when he awoke. If it did, she would be immensely disappointed. Still, she had taken her clan's optimistic nature, that he wouldn't be like a disappointed ending to a clever puzzle. Perhaps he was something she had needed. She liked puzzles that could be solved. Mysteries that kept her on her toes, something interesting. One thing was his chakra. It feels amazing, so warm and welcoming. She had never sensed a chakra so happy, so full of life and vibrant. She felt an uncharacteristic faint wave of heat appear on her cheeks. The closest that she could compare was Hashirama, while it carried a pleasant feeling. His was a torch in the darkness, but the blonde was a bonfire that radiated warmth. Like his chakra carried a purity to it, untainted by negative emotions and hate. She wondered how such a thing was possible. Now it was the second day, and she partially controlled her excitement. She began to get impatient for him to awake. She wanted to get started on her puzzle. To her surprise and excitement, his chakra and its warmth continued to grow. Mito felt the fabric of the blanket on her hands. Her head rested against the softness of a bed. Her back and neck ached in protest at the awkward position she slept in. It took her a while to determine where she had slept in her drowsy state. She groaned as she rose after leaning on the bed and she figured out that she had slept in the guest room. She heard some of the children laughing and running outside her apartment. The sun shone through the blinds of the room. She heard the constant ticking from the clock that hung to the right. She looked to see that only an hour had passed since she was in this room. I actually slept in here. She looked back to the bed to see the ruffled blonde asleep peacefully. It was late in the day as the sun would begin to set in an hour or so. She stood from the chair and walked out of the room. Her apartment wasn't exactly large, but fairly sizable since she lived alone. She walked out into the hall, her room directly across from the guest room. Her apartment had two small bedrooms, one for herself and a possible guest. She walked down a small hall to enter the bathroom on the right to freshen herself before continuing on with her day. She stood in front of the mirror to gauge herself. Her hair had some loose strands that had escaped from her buns, and that her white kimono had misplaced itself. She quickly freed her hair from her tie and gathered the loose strands of her red hair to retie it. Satisfied, she quickly straightened her kimono into a more suitable position and exited the bathroom. She felt a little embarrassment from her reactions towards the blonde. She was worried of his well-being for sure, but to sleep at his bedside like a concerned lover. She shook her head at that and continued down the short hall. Immediately at the end of the hall was the exit to out of the house, to her left was the living room and to her right the kitchen. It was her home, but she didn't really consider it to be one. Her apartment was decorated with various items, but it didn't feel homey to her. Just a place where she slept and ate food in private. Although it did feel more like a home whenever her sister was here. She traversed into her kitchen and grabbed a cup in one of the three cupboards. She felt a little childish that she was excited for him to awake. She filled her cup with water and felt the pleasant sensation of the cool liquid going down her throat. She sighed as she put the glass down in the sink. She reminisced about her mother as she walked down to her room. Her words resounded in her mind as she recalled a moment from her childhood. "My dear daughter." A mother bent down while little Mito ran after her and slammed into her, encasing her mother in a desperate hug. She felt her mother's arms slid around in a near similar embrace. "Mommy." She clutched her tightly, some tears escaping from her. "I don't want you to go," she pleaded. She was dressed in her battle attire, preparing to be sent off on a mission. Mito had heard that the skirmishes between clans had begun to get rougher, and that more fatalities were occurring. 7-year-old Mito was worried that she might never see her mother again. She felt her mother's hand run through her hair in a calming manner. "It's okay, dear." Mito continued to cry as her mother started to hum for her. Slowly, she felt her tears lessen, but the sadness was still present. She looked up in the warm eyes of her red-haired mother. "Listen, I want to tell you something," she said softly. Mito nodded in understanding and listened intently at her next words. "Love is powerful. It will always beat negative emotions. It can save you from the dark." She smiled lovingly at her. "That's why I'll always be with you, because you're a part of it, did you know?" Mito smiled shyly at her and nodded enthusiastically. She felt the hold her mother had on her disappear. She rose a little and planted a kiss on forehead. "Please take care your little sister for me, okay? Until I get back." She smiled at her. Mito walked slowly down the hall, taking each step carefully as she hummed a tune that her mother would do whenever she was put to bed. She recalled what her mother had said before she left. Love will always beat hate and save you from darkness." It was one of the last words that her mother had passed down to her. At that time, she was reassured that her mother would return, only to be devastated at the news that she had fallen. Nonetheless, she carried on with her mother's wishes. She cared very much of her sister, and it took a long while before she realized what kind of love her mother had meant. The love of a family. Not just from her sister. Her mother took strength of her own family, of her two daughters. She couldn't remember her father as he had died when she was young, but her mother had reassured her that he was a great man. She vaguely remembered the love she had in her voice and the sadness that was it as she talked about him. Mito wondered when she would have children of her own as she opened the door to her room. She felt a slight change of the warm chakra radiating from behind her. Not one to leave her curiosity be disappointed, she closed the door to room and went directly to the guest room. Although his chakra had fluctuated several times before, she thought that there would be no change this time. Since the one earlier today was more pronounced than this one. She opened the door and suddenly found herself looking at impossibly blue eyes. His eyes widened. In fear. "Or, you're really beautiful, you know," he blurted out hoarsely. She looked at him for a moment. So bold, she thought to herself. He started to cough roughly and he clutched at his throat, and Mito realized he would need something to drink. "I'll return soon." As she quickly exited the room. She felt her excitement as some of her questions would be answered. She quickly grabbed another glass from the cupboard and filled with it water. She felt an unfamiliar sensation on her cheeks. Am I blushing again? She realized as she was subtly bouncing as she finished filling the cup. This time she slowed down on her pace to return to the room where the mysterious blonde sat in. It wasn't that she wasn't called beautiful by other men, in fact there were many who had called her that, but never did she ever respond to it or react that way. Perhaps it was how he had said it wasn't a simple courtesy or him trying to flirt. He had said it with conviction, his voice and eyes told no lies or carried an emotion that made her uncomfortable. It was innocent, and he truly believed in his words. She made her way into the room. She saw him looking down and breathing shallowly on the bed. He looked up and their eyes met for a moment before he caught the cup of water in her hand. Here, she said to him as she closed the distance and handed him the glass. He eagerly took and nodded in appreciation. He disregarded his manners as he completely poured the water straight down his mouth. Loud gulping and trails of water running down his chin and neck from his inability to drink the water quickly. She watched him curiously as he quickly finished the rest of the water. Whoa! As he wiped away the moisture on his chin. God, that was amazing, he sputtered. Mito was a bit amused at his actions, a slight smile on her face. He looked at her and she saw mass confusion in his cerulean. So, where the hell am I? As he scratched his neck. In Uzushiogakure, the red-haired said calmly to him. It didn't seem to lessen in curiosity and only increased his confusion. Yeah, that didn't help at all. No idea where that is. In fact, he replied. Mito heard no form of worry in his voice, showing her that he was either unconcerned or hid it well. She did the confusion grow within his eyes. She thought she might start out simple. What's your name? She asked softly, trying to sound as comforting as possible. He looked at her for a long moment. It seemed his ocean blue eyes sort of had a piercing element as she attempted not to break his gaze. Damn, I don't even know that either, he replied, sounding defeated. His eyebrows furrowed, as in pain. Mito felt the need to help him, to comfort him from his confusion. She could tell that he sounded genuinely believed in his words. Do you not remember anything at all? She asked. Now she was definitely curious about the strange and she had to admit handsome character. Well, the last thing is, falling from the sky, he chuckled. Although how I got there, I got no clue. Mito was amazed at how relaxed he was, like it didn't bother him at all. That's okay, she replied happily, something unusual as she would mostly reply in a more calm demeanor. Her curiosity had gotten the better of her, she was glad that the mystery would keep going. That the puzzle had actually grown in size, rather than solved. I'm Mito Uzumaki, she smiled at him. Which he had responded with one of his own, which made her heart stutter for a moment, not that she noticed. Hi, he replied happily. She heard the loud grumbling of his stomach, he scratched his neck in an embarrassed manner. Hey, I don't suppose that you have anything to eat? He asked. Mito thought about the options. I suppose I can cook something up, and try to get something out of him. She didn't really know if it would work. Or we could go to a restaurant, if he could recognize anyone or anything. Certainly he had never been around here, she had never felt such a unique chakra before. She could never forget something like that. We can go eat somewhere of your choosing, she suggested. Man, I'm starving, as he pushed the blankets off him. He immediately tried to stand, only to fall straight to floor. Are you alright? As he attempted to stand. She was at a loss on whether to help him or not. If he would be grateful for such a thing or if he would feel like it was an insult to his pride. Yeah, as he shakily stood up on his feet. He stood at least 2 inches taller than her, whereas she stood at 5.7. Mito remembered that he had a jacket, his snug fishnet shirt was slightly distracting to say the least. She walked over to the desk beside the bed as grabbed the jacket under the bag. These were found on you, she mentioned to the items, and she gave him the orange and black jacket. She hadn't touched it at all since he was placed here by some doctors and shinobi. Thanks, as he put on the jacket. Should I take the bag? He asked, pointing towards the said item. She thought about it for a moment, what would the situation be now that he was awake? I think you can leave it for now, she replied. They would need to visit her grandfather later on, they would figure out the situation by then. He nodded quickly as zipped up the jacket partway, and he checked to see if it really fit. She looked at him in shock, as he turned slightly to look at his back. That's the Uzumaki crest. Could he be a Senju? Or from Konoha? While the Senju wore the crest in their friendship, there was talks that they were going to add it to Junin uniforms in Konoha. It was odd, it looked like an ordinary jacket and she hadn't heard of the crest being used as fashion. While the Uzumaki was known for their fuinjutsu, they weren't that famous as to be used a part of everyday clothing, other than the fact that the crest might hold something of value to him. Could he be an Uzumaki? There was many questions that she wanted to ask him. She restrained herself before she fired them off and possibly scare him away. I think I'm ready now. Mito caught the slight stammer, but ignored it for his sake. She nodded and pointed at the sandals under the table. He understood as he went to put it on. Now I think you're ready, as she walked out of the room with him trailing behind. Do I really like orange this much? He commented sourly. She peeked behind her to see him looking at his clothing of choice. I don't think. He seemed to be knocked out of his thought process for a moment. No, wait. I think orange is an awesome color. She was amused at his sudden direction in opinion. She could easily tell that he was about to insult his taste in color. Although it did slightly interest her at one other thing being confirmed, he liked the color orange. Insignificant really, but it was a small piece that would make him up. Is there reason why? She asked. They had reached exit from out of the apartment and she reached down to the mat to grab her own sandals and went to put them. I wish I knew, but I like the way it looks on me, he replied. Mito looked up at him for a moment. He was peering at various decorations strewn in her apartment. For a flicker of a moment, she saw some fear in his eyes before it dissipated and he turned to look at her as she finished putting on her sandals. You have really pretty hair, you know, he complimented. Staring straight into her eyes, he had said it so nonchalantly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She was entirely unprepared for such a sudden and unusual compliment as she felt another blush flash on her face. No one really compliments on my hair, she stated, trying to get rid of the blush. He simply shrugged his shoulders in response. Well, I don't see why, he merely waved away her comment. It's only the truth. She could almost feel the sincerity in his words, no matter casually he said it. I see. She turned away from him to open the door, and hide herself from him. Thank you. I suppose. She opened it for him while he went on ahead. She locked the door and joined him outside. By then she had gotten control of her blush. She silently berated herself at being so flustered at such a comment. The sun was about to set and the sky was beginning to darken. Purple clashed across the sky. She took in a breath of cool air and she led the way down a hall, the right side filled with doors that entered other apartment while the left had a rail and showed other villagers on the streets below. The blonde followed silently behind as she walked down some stairs. They reached the open street when Mito saw a couple or two going for a night out. The blonde ended up standing beside her, and at her realization it very much looked like they were going on a date. I don't even know his name. Nor does he. She couldn't just back out now. She proceeded on her with the blue-eyed man following beside her. She noticed that he looked a bit anxious as his posture was slightly rigid than before while she was in her apartment. She recalled earlier before being distracted by his compliment. I guess he does feel a little scared. She guessed that he had hidden those emotions by distracting himself. With her as a victim, somehow, she didn't feel a slightest bit insulted. He was in an unfamiliar setting, and he didn't even know himself. She felt a little sorry for him and she made the attempt to converse with him. So, she said, trying to catch his attention, in which he immediately looked at her. She could see a little relief in his eyes, like he had begun to be overwhelmed. Since we don't exactly know where you had come from, how about you get to know me? She suggested. Where was she supposed to start with him? Ask him the same questions and hope there's something that comes out of it. She thought that she might as well make him more comfortable around her, and help him distract himself. Okay. He nodded in agreement. So how did you find me? He questioned. I remember seeing nothing like a village around before I hit the ground. At least I think I do. I was at a personal spot when I sensed you in the sky. Really? What's the spot? She took a careful moment before she decided to answer him. It's a beautiful meadow, with all various species of flowers, she replied. You can hear the waves crashing against the shore as you look at all the color in the field. She got a hold of herself before she blabbered on. Wow, he replied. Wait, you said sensed? How did you do that? He asked curiously. Mito made a right turn on the street. They were getting closer to the restaurant area. I'm a sensory type shinobi, it's what I can do, she replied. Cool. I'm a ninja too? He asked, avoiding a small child that ran in front of him. I think so, she replied back to him, remembering seeing the gear he had in his bag. She heard a whispered, awesome, from him. Mito saw several more couples in the crowd, all heading towards where no doubt she was heading. I can only hope that no one recognizes me. She never had a boyfriend before. Caring for her sister had been a top priority before, and so was being a shinobi of her clan. Except now her sister was old enough to live on her own and all the fighting had begun to die down drastically since the forming of ninja villages. If she was recognized by one of her friends with a handsome young man, it would spread like a wildfire since she was known as being sort of a prude. Even her own little sister had begun to comment on that, saying how she needed to find a man. Mito shook her head at that. There was already some talks that she had begun to flirt with the esteemed Senju clan leader. Much to the delight of her sister. Can I ask you something? She nodded. Why are you helping me? He asked. She looked at him as they made a left turn on a street. You looked like you needed help, she replied. He didn't look convinced. Nah, I don't think that's it. He waved her off. Quote. I thought that you might have gotten hurt, so I brought you here. He didn't reply straight away, making her relieved at the stop in his questioning. Quote. I don't think that's all of it. She nearly wanted to sigh in exasperation, before she reined it down. I mean, you could have just dropped me off at the hospital, right? She had nothing to say, she could only nod at being caught. I was ordered to. She didn't like that answer at all. Although she did try to sound as convincing as possible. She hoped it was the last one in his questioning. She regretted trying make him more comfortable by getting him to know her. He also had this cute smug smile on his face. Nah, that's not it either, he replied, a grin on his face. What? She replied rather loudly for someone like her. He was starting to infuriate her. Why doesn't he take the hint? She definitely did want to talk about why. She got in control of herself before she yelled like that. She quickly looked around to see nobody had noticed the calm Mito slightly yell out in anger. Why do you keep pestering about it? She replied sourly. I don't know really. I guess that's the way I am, he replied, no change of his personality that she basically just yelled at him. He still had this wide smile on his face. I mean, you were so friendly when you didn't have to be, he added. She sighed as they continued to walk, returning to her normal self. How would you know something like that? What if I was feigning? She asked curiously. He scratched his chin as he contemplated. I guess. I just sorta know, he simply responded. It's all in your eyes. She was a bit stunned by his answer. She didn't think that he could simply tell just by looking into someone's eyes. She had wanted to know him, this mysterious person she just began to talk to barely an hour ago. She wanted to know about him, but she didn't want to let him know too much about herself. She never really opened up to anyone else but her sister. She couldn't just lie to this person, since he somehow could tell them apart just by looking into her eyes. She definitely couldn't handle it not looking into someone's eyes while they conversed, it just wasn't proper. I was curious about you, she admitted. She felt a little embarrassed at that. She could almost imagine him laughing at him at such a lame reason and for him to call her out on another lie. Yeah, I guess it's not every day that you see someone randomly fall out of the sky, huh? He chuckled. As they continued walking on. She looked him wondrously. You really are odd. They turned around another corner. Hey, are we close? Starving here. As he patted his stomach. One more turn, she replied. Wait. She felt a hand on her shoulder, and she resisted glaring at him as she turned to look at him. It seemed he was oblivious to social etiquette or didn't care about it. She ignored it since he was suffering from amnesia, Luckily the hand came off as he pointed towards a direction behind her. Yes. There's a ramen stand. What about ramen? As she turned to look at the direction he pointed at. No. He pointed towards a particular ramen stand titled Whirling Ramen. It's just that. I think that ramen would be amazing right now. She turned to look at him, and saw some slight drool at the edge of his mouth. He quickly got in control of himself and turned to look at her. Can we? He asked. Does ramen sound better than fresh red bean soup, sizzling grilled chicken, seasoned fried rice and grilled salmon with miso paste and a whisked egg? She frantically tried to formulate appetizing dishes, so that they wouldn't go there. He stared into space, as she finished. She thought that had accomplished it. Nope. Ramen does sound better, he stated. Come on, let's eat, as he crossed the street to go ahead without. It definitely seemed that he was ignorant of social etiquette. He's really stubborn, she sighed as she made her way to Whirling Ramen. He had already made his way inside the stand. It was small, it had flaps that separated the outside and a few chairs that the unnamed blonde sat on. She didn't hate ramen, it was a bit too low class compared to what she regularly ate. It wasn't that she hated the place, in fact, there was someone that she visited all the time in there. She didn't want to be seen with him, to be mistaken that she had a boyfriend. She ventured inside and sat herself beside the orange-clad man. Ah, Mito, a thin middle-aged man by the name of Kenji appeared from the back. He wore a white apron and had short brown hair and had a small scar running down his left cheek. He looked more welcoming rather than intimidating despite this. He was the owner of the small ramen stand. Good evening, Kenji, she replied out of courtesy. She saw him look back and forth between the blonde at her several times. He luckily made no attempt at commenting on this and continued on with business. What can I get you to? He asked. She breathed out a quiet sigh of relief. She was thankful to him, she was already going to get enough torture from the next person that would inevitably show up. Miso pork ramen, the blonde replied after looking at the menu in the back for several long moments. Same here please, Mito added. It seemed Kenji couldn't help but make a little jab. One bowl or separate? She looked at him for a moment, willing down a blush. Separate I'm guessing, as he went to the back. After a minute or so she waited impatiently for the next person to arrive. The cerulean eyed her curiously but she ignored him. She wanted to know more about him and she loved that he had amnesia. She wanted to know what kind of skills he had in fuinjutsu, since it was enough to impress her grandfather. She wanted to know his name and how he came out of the sky. Soon a red-haired teen popped out of the back. Her long red hair was tied into a bun to keep it out of the soup. She wore a white apron with a green short-sleeved shirt. She was fair-skinned like her and also shared the same eyes, black and pupil-less. She was slender and was several inches shorter than her and had a more rounded face. The teenager's face instantly brightened as she saw her. Mito. As he rushed to put down the soup. Soon as she did she leaned from across the counter to try and plant a hug, which she had to complete. Hello Emmy. So where were you? She asked. As she stepped back from the hug, she looked at the blonde beside her, still waiting for his ramen that hadn't been set down in front of him. Dates, right? Seeing the blonde beside her. He's an acquaintance, Mito replied to her. He paid no attention as he looked hungrily at the ramen that was out of reach. It starts off that way. Next thing you know you're married. She made her way to the blonde, who had only noticed as she walked in front of him. I'm Emmy, Mito's sister. She let out a hand, which he completed the handshake. What's up? I don't know my name though. Weird. She shot at a glance at Mito, which Mito mentioned to the ramen. I guess I'll talk to you later. She handed down the ramen, and left to the back. Yeah, the spiky blonde said as he snapped his chopsticks. Finally, surprisingly, he waited for her to grab hers. It seems he's not entirely oblivious to it after all. As she prepared herself, Itadakimasu, he yelled out. She silently watched as he dove into his ramen, her being impressed forgotten as he ate his food like a starved dog. She reasoned to herself that he hadn't really ate anything filling lately. She ignored him, returned to ramen and ate hers quietly. She thought about his energy and attitude, which was filled with positivity, like his warm chakra was of any indication. She felt the need to be beside him, to feel his chakra. She was immensely curious about him, the way she had complimented her red hair. Which actually made her feel pretty, despite all of the constant compliments other men made towards her. It felt like she could actually believe in him. He had energy, but it actually made her feel like her outlook had brightened. He actually made her blush several times today. She turned to look at him. She could lightly compare his personality to Hashirama right now. He was positive, but he had several outlooks that she didn't know if Naruto would share. She wanted to know more about him. Is something the matter? She asked, seeing him slow down on his eating. He looked down at his soup for another moment. Huh. He turned to look at her. My name is Naruto, he replied. A ramen condiment. She remembered that she actually came out to see if he could remember anything. She was far too concerned with it looking like a date. Hello Naruto, she smiled. Which he easily beat with one of his flashy grins. She noticed that it made her heart flutter pleasantly. She realized she actually wouldn't have minded if it looked like a date. How could you have eaten so much? Mito asked as she handed an unpleasant amount of ryo over to Kenji. He smiled widely and deposited the ryo into the register. Naruto looked at a stack of bowls, the top slightly teetered, threatening to fall over. He rubbed in his belly in satisfaction over the amount of ramen he ate. He looked over the red-haired woman, her look in mild disbelief at the bowls. He could imagine the succulent taste of the dish, the texture of the noodle on his tongue, along with each and every distinct flavor that the miso pork ramen provided to his taste buds. The broth was near perfection to his opinion, and he would simply drink it after finishing the noodles and other ingredients. One thing was for certain, it was amazing. He nodded to himself in agreement. Except there was something missing, something he couldn't point his finger on. Sorry, I guess I forgot my money. If I have any, he replied embarrassingly. He could go for more, but he didn't want to keep Mito any longer that he had to. She had finished her bowl of ramen long before, and had looked in shock at how fast he had eaten his share and amongst others. He had gotten so distracted that he had completely forgotten he didn't have any method of payment for the noodles. Luckily for him, Mito had agreed to pay for his meal. He felt a little disappointment that he had forgotten about it. He reasoned that he would make it up for her one way or another. It's all right, he heard her say. She stood from her seat and straightened her white kimono. He stood up himself and followed her out the flaps of the small ramen shop. Come again, he heard Kenji yell out from within the restaurant. He had a hopeful tone of voice, satisfied from the amount of ramen he had eaten. He once again thought about what was missing. Something that could have been added to make it to perfection. Mito, I'll see you after. He heard her sister call out soon after. Emmy, was it? Recalling her name, the duo walked together and she replied with her own goodbyes. He followed Mito and he quickly figured out that they were going a different direction. He looked at the sky. It seemed the night had fallen instead of the dying rays of sunlight. Some street lights had turned on to keep the darkness away. The streets were mostly bare, but occasionally a couple or so would come out from another street, enjoying their private walk. He looked back up to see the beautiful amount of stars in the sky, shining brightly, as well as the crescent moon. A smooth, pleasant breeze came by and he felt it flick his hair calmingly. Naruto suddenly felt at peace, like tomorrow wouldn't matter and that he was relaxing somewhere and feeling the burning sun on his skin. He reveled in the feeling, and disregarded on why he was feeling such tenderness. Hey, he randomly called out. It felt natural to him as he turned to face the woman beside him. He flinched a little as he saw who was beside him. She turned her head towards him to look into his eyes. He saw the unmistakable aura she held in her eyes. Yes, oddly, he was expecting someone else. There was only the red-haired woman beside him. Luckily she didn't notice the flinch he gave off, but the feeling he felt earlier wisped away. He hid his disappointment, but confusion washed over him. Where are we going? He asked. A question he had wanted to ask just disappeared and he had no hints as to what it was. He decided to ask an earlier concern, since they obviously weren't going back to her place. He was completely lost and had no idea what event might unfold before him. Night had taken over and he had no place to stay. We're going to see my grandfather. Oh, for what? Find a place for you to sleep in, she replied. Oh, cool. He certainly felt like an oddity here. He had woken barely more than an hour ago and in some beautiful stranger's home no less. He peeked at woman beside him. who carried herself proudly. She had beautiful smooth red hair tied in buns, but some swept aside that hugged her cheeks and jawline. Her lips were pursed, but he could tell they were quite supple and pink. Her skin was quite porcelain in comparison to his, and she had a purple-ish diamond mark on her forehead. She wore some sort of small golden crown between her tied-up buns. Under her white kimono she wore some sort red dress underneath and flowed gently above the ground. He wondered if he had ever met someone who dressed as elegant as she did. Despite her regal appearance she had this childlike curiosity in her eyes. He also just felt the warmth and tenderness within them. "Don't worry, I'll visit you," she said reassuringly. Thanks, so how long was I out? He asked. 2 days, she replied. He could tell she was eager to ask some questions, but was holding back. It was obvious as to why. "I don't even know myself. What's my last name?" He tapped his chin thoughtfully. Only one surname kept appearing in his head. "So how does a Naruto Uzumaki sound?" As he continued tapping his chin. Although the only connection was that was only the surname he'd heard. He looked curiously at the red head. It did have a nice ring to it. He thought he saw an faint blush appear for a split second before it disappeared. It sounds perfect actually, although he did catch the small stammer. "I really like your hair. It's like gold," she added almost nervously. He noticed that were plenty of red-haired people around here. Occasionally he found the brown-haired or raven-haired individual when they walking to find something to eat. Hee, thanks, he replied with a smile. He swept a hand over his unruly hair. He realized that he hadn't exactly looked over himself in a mirror as of yet. "It might be a possibility," she added. "That you actually could be an Uzumaki." "Really? How's that?" "Your chakra, it's similar to ours," she explained. "No means of really confirming that you are though." Well, we'll figure it out eventually, you know," he replied. A calm silence swept over them. Mito added a nod and he decided to take another peek at her. He saw a different expression on her face. Her eyes were focused and her lips were slightly unnatural compared to before. With nothing to focus on, and with the lack of talk with their companionable silence, he attempted to recreate her expression. After a moment or so, he found that she was biting the inside of her right cheek, and which made her lips slightly misplaced. Getting the little mystery over and done with, his thoughts pranced about nothing in particular. This amnesia thing is boring. He tried to contemplate, but it lacked cohesive direction. There wasn't much to think about when he couldn't recall anything. All it did was create more questions that couldn't be answered. He might as well share it with Mito later on. Bringing his mind together, he focused about the dinner they shared together and felt himself slightly drooling at the thought of the dish. "Oh yeah, thanks for paying for the ramen," wiping the hint of drool starting to form at the corner of his mouth. "It's of no concern, I was the one who had forgotten you had money." "So I do have some money, huh? I promise I'll pay you back." He figured that it was in the bag that he had left behind at her apartment. "You don't need to," she replied, which surprised him a little. "Really? But I want to." He was met with silence, looked over to her to see a contemplative look. An anticipating smile revealed itself after a moment. "Well, if you insist. I do. Then I suppose I can come up with something," she replied. He saw an expression that showed him that she was anticipating for when he did. He speculated on what it might be about. Looking forward to it, he answered honestly. He wanted to be around her, since she was so intent on helping him with his memories. The red-haired woman did carry a welcoming presence. He noticed her slow down on her pace and looked to her to see what it was. "Here we are," she added, looking in up front. He followed her gaze to see a large building on an incline, and stairs led the way to the top. It wasn't exactly grand, but it did look impressive compared to the other buildings surrounding it. "This is weird." He was lost at what he was comparing the building to. The thought escaped from him before he could catch it. "This is the Uzumaki mansion. This is where the clan leader resides in and the village's leader." "So are there two people?" he asked, only for the redhead to shake her head. "They are the one and the same." She took the lead once more and Naruto followed. "Oh." He inspected the building more closely as they walked up the stairs. The building was 3 stories in height, although the third floor seemed to be smaller in width. He speculated that the clan leader resided on that floor. 4 large decorated wooden pillars were supporting an open roof before the doors that led inside. Right above the doors were a large crest of a red swirl. Beside the stairs were grass and several flowers popping from out of the ground. Naruto was brought out of his detailing when he noticed the woman was walking slightly in front of him. He would be blind if he didn't notice her swaying hips. The obi tied around her waist only accentuated her bottom. He cleared his throat and furthered his pace to match hers. He quickly willed down the heat on his cheeks. So, your grandfather is here, right? Yes, he's the clan leader. He reached the door first and opened it for her. Thank you. He nodded and followed her inside. Damn it. When he noticed she was in front, one's eyes trailed over before he quickly looked straight ahead. I'm no perv. He felt a little awkward speeding up to walk beside her once more. He focused on surroundings of the building to distract himself. After a short walk through a small hallway, they entered a large room. There was a pair of stairs that they took that led to the 3rd floor in the middle of the room, while there was surrounding hallways that led to different rooms on each floor. The room itself was painted beige that was added with some brownish colors. He heard several people talking nearby, muffled by their distance and barriers. He briefly thought of the purpose of the building before reasoning that their intent was on caring for the village. So how long has the village been here? He asked, noticing the relatively new furniture and lack of worn items. They reached the top on the 3rd floor. It was relatively smaller than the other floors as there was no hallways. There was only one open door, which was on the opposite side of the room. It's only been a few months since it's been formed, otherwise one of the first of the hidden ninja villages, he nodded. Hidden villages. It felt familiar to him. He felt a little frustrated that he couldn't recall it. Quickly closing the distance, they entered the open doorway that had a receptionist just beside another closed door. Mito walked up to a middle-aged woman, dressed in formal attire. The blonde stood some distance behind and decided to inspect the room but was listening on their conversation. Excuse me, is my grandfather here? The woman took a brief peek at both the guests before shaking her head. I'm sorry, he left on an important meeting that the clans of Konohagakure wanted to discuss with him, she replied. Konohagakure. He heard some talking between both Mito and the secretary. So it's another ninja village, huh? That's pretty cool. I wonder how many other villages there are. He mused a little about this. Before he noticed that Mito had turned to him out of the corner of his eye. What's up? Turning his attention to the red-haired woman. She held a slight look of disbelief. It seemed my grandfather will not be here for another few days. It took a moment for him to click on his predicament. Oh, he chuckled nervously. So I guess that I just sleep on the streets then, he joked. She scoffed and shook her head at his distasteful joke. Nonsense. Quote, okay then, what now? Mito walked alongside the blonde, well with her slightly in the lead. She didn't exactly think she would have suggested that he stay over at her apartment. He was someone that needed help, and she couldn't turn him away. He didn't deserve to spend a night on the streets, or spend most of his money staying at a hotel. What kind of first impression would that send him? She wasn't given a definite estimate on her grandfather returning to the village. She wondered how important their meeting was, since Shin seemed to have forgotten about their mysterious guest. She looked over to the mysterious blonde. He was far too interesting for her own good. So how do you feel so far? The blue-eyed man looked her in the eye. Well, he wore a slight confused expression, along with a contemplative look. I feel really weird, like I don't belong here, he replied. That's putting it a bit mildly, but he hasn't been here long either. Perhaps that you can get accustomed to this place, Mito suggested. They were halfway towards her apartment. Several kids ran through an alleyway, playing hide and seek or tag. That was one thing that was missing from before. A feeling of safeness that their previous lifestyle that couldn't be accomplished before. I hope so. But I feel. She turned to look at her companion. I feel like something's missing. Other than my memories, I mean. Mito was a little bewildered by his comment, but mostly fascinated. What could it be? Was it something that was a part of him? A companion? Or a personal item? For a moment she thought amusingly that it might have been the nightcap he had in his pack. We might find something in your pack that I found alongside you. Maybe. I think it's something big though. He seemed to have forgotten about his little dilemma and simply relaxed. He put his hands over the back of his neck as they walked ever closer to her place. Interesting how nonchalant and unworried he is, she thought to herself. There was a chance that he might never recall the rest of his memories at all. Yet, even with the casual comment, she felt certain that he thought he would regain his past. They walked the rest of the way to her apartment in a companionable silence. She was followed up the stairs and to her door. Unlocking the door with her key, she opened the door to invite him inside. Thanks again. I really like that you're a nice person, he said rather loudly. It's what anyone would have done, she replied. He merely waved her off while he took off his sandals. Maybe, but that still doesn't take away that you're a good person, he retorted. I just see the kindness in you, I guess, he added. Even if you are a private person. That again, she thought. He certainly was on the mark that she didn't exactly share details of her life to others. Mito wondered on what made her share things of herself, but she reasoned that it was to make him comfortable and to help him. He walked off to the hallway without her leading the way. She was a little agitated that he went off, and not be like a normal guest and wait for her to show him around. He rounded off the hallway and into the guest room while she took off her sandals. Perhaps that's why she was a little drawn to him. Normal was a little stale. Naruto was nearly on the opposite spectrum on that scale, well as far as she knew. Mito walked through the hallway. The door was wide open to his impromptu room. He was in the middle of fumbling with his bag on the desk. He looked up and smiled after a quick second. You want to see if I can remember anything, right? Let's check it out, he mentioned for her to come in. Am I that predictable? She did say that she curious in him. She felt regret that she had actually told him that. Her curiosity easily won over her frustration and entered into the room. She sat herself down on the side of the bed. Naruto came over and recklessly spilled the contents on the mattress. It's like he doesn't care at all. She was still somewhat amused at this, more especially at next comment. Whoa, do I actually wear this? Picking up the toothy nightcap. I'd like to think so, she snickered. He gave a heartwarming smile before returning to the items. The next thing he picked up was the red-black flamed cloak, which he quickly wore. It's pretty cool, he said to himself, turning in place as he inspected on how the garb fit him. She noted some kanji on the back. Mount Myoboku, she said aloud. He looked quizzically at her. Where's that? I don't have a clue. She was delighted to have found another clue to him. Perhaps a little interesting was such a shortcoming term to describe him. Figuring that pondering about it wouldn't bring out any results, he continued on. He froze after a moment. Did you remember something? She said excitedly. Her thoughts raced towards what he might have recalled. Wait, I know this. She looked towards the items to figure out if any of the items were responsible. Her best guess was the tri-prong kunai amongst the ordinary items. He seemed to reach for it, only to pass right by it and over to his stuffed frog wallet. I call this Gamma-chan. He bounced the wallet on his hand, a proud and nostalgic smile on his face. Mito wasn't expecting this, completely blindsided that he had recalled something insignificant that didn't reveal much other than he was a little childish in nature. She giggled, which had quickly grown to full-blown laughter. He had an amused grin, eyes full of appreciation. He chuckled alongside her, as she quickly restrained herself. You have a beautiful laugh, he added. She gathered herself before she replied to him. Thank you. She wasn't entirely sure how to respond to him. How was she supposed to reply? Would a compliment suffice? She wasn't well versed in that regard. Kunoichi were people and ninja like everyone else. Seduction was entirely optional. She obviously chose not to specify in that manner. He seemed to have moved on before she could reply. He unrolled the sealing scroll, which she remembered as the scroll that was kept full of the special kunai. Okay, what's going here? I feel like I should do something, as he inspected the sealing formula. Here, let me show you. She was given the scroll and he looked curiously at her. You channel chakra on the formula. Depending on the amount of chakra and bursts, she demonstrated it, and two kunai flew wildly a foot in the air. She was about to grab them before she was beaten to it. He easily caught them by their handles. He twirled the one in his right hand as he inspected. Huh. Cool, he said. It wasn't impressive by shinobi standards, but a mere civilian would have struggled. So I guess he really is a ninja. She guessed that he had only done it on instinct. So what are these markings? He asked. She had some time to inspect the formula itself. She came to the same conclusion as her grandfather. I believe it's a space-time sealing formula, so I suppose it's used for teleportation, she answered him. He hummed while continued to inspect it. She noted how good the cloak fit on him, like it was especially made for him. There wasn't much that was answered today, and only more mysteries appeared. He didn't seem to have recalled anything that related to his past, other than his wallet. So what is it that's missing in him? A constantly growing puzzle, along pieces that were blurred and only revealed itself after some time. It excited her. You didn't recall anything else? She asked curiously. Nah, he replied. He set aside the kunai while he prodded the other items, which were insignificant and didn't reveal anything else. She yawned tiredly and stood up from the bed. I think I shall go to bed now. He looked up at her. All right. Good night, as she turned towards the door. Good night. Mito lay in her bed. Her hair was freed from her buns and she was dressed in a conservative nightgown. She thought about today's events. It was a bit odd now. Sure, the blonde was sleeping here once again, but he wasn't unconscious this time. She also invited to stay over. While she was satisfied with it looking like a date, undoubtedly she wasn't okay if someone she practically met today was seen entering her home and looking like. She felt her face flare up at the thought. She certainly felt desires to be intimate with the opposite, but only with a man she loved. It was only very recently the forming of the village that she even begun to search for someone of potential. It was a peaceful time and there was no threat of war on the horizon since every new village was focusing on recruiting clans and constructing. It was clear to her really. He was right, it wasn't every day that she met someone who fell out of the sky and someone who was suffering from amnesia. She thought about his strong jawline and adorable whiskers, oceanic blue eyes that spoke of immeasurable depth. His enticing lips and firm voice. He was very peculiar and she wanted to find out more and help him along the way. It certainly was a bonus that she found him attractive. She recalled her thoughts on when he said their clan name. Naruto Uzumaki. When he had said it, for some odd reason, she thought of how he might obtain that name. Marriage. It was only for a split second, but it had made her flustered. So she just spluttered whatever that came out to distract herself and only for her to comment on his wild blonde hair. He certainly looked exotic in this place. There wasn't really people with golden hair in Uzu. She wondered what he was doing, since he had just woken up not long ago. She wasn't as tired as she initially thought. Perhaps she would need to be a good host and figure out something he could do to entertain himself. She sat up from her bed and turned on the lamp and thought about what he could do. She had several books that he could read, she wasn't sure if he would like any of them. Most were fiction, and delved into aspects of life and morality. She didn't think he would like little romance she had. Mito thought that perhaps he would enjoy a few games of Shugi or Go with her. She didn't particularly have many opponents to test her skill. Deciding that she would ask him herself, she walked to her door and absent-mindedly straightened her hair. The door opened silently. She wondered if she would live here long enough for it to creak. She walked across to the door opposite and knocked quietly. There was no answer and she knocked once again. Still no answer. She thought briefly that he might have gone for a walk. She turned the knob and peeked through the door to confirm her theory. Mito nearly faltered when she saw him lightly snoring, dead asleep on the bed. How is that possible? She thought as some drool escaped from the corner of his mouth. She nearly let out a snicker when she heard a ramen escape from him. I suppose he really enjoys the dish. She realized what she doing when he tossed and turned over the blanket, revealing that he wore orange boxers. Her face turned red and she quickly closed the door to the guest room and walked back to her own room. He's unpredictable. As she slid under her blanket and turned off her lamp, Mito thought once more about her new guest while she waited for sleep to take her. She didn't remember the last time she had laughed like that, carefree almost. Mount Myoboku. It sounded a little familiar, it was something distant she couldn't pinpoint. It flitted around in her head in wait for a specific object or word to help jumpstart her memory. She disregarded it and decided to wait for it to come around. She was also interested about the seal on his kunai, curious to see how it functioned in action. Wondering if it was anything similar to the Shunshin Jutsu, which was accelerated movement. Although it differed as the seal allowed transportation, perhaps of the person with the technique. It was clear that he had shinobi training. Perhaps some training and chakra exercises would help stimulate his abilities. Her thoughts roamed about the blonde through the night, until sleep overruled her. She heard some loud irritating knocking. Repetitive and in a specific manner, it felt like her sister had arrived at her house. She opened her eyes to find that her room had brightened from the morning sun. Mito felt like the sun had risen too early. A brief look at her clock revealed she had woken up an hour later than she usually woke up. Odd. At 8 in the morning she regularly felt rested. Another hour for sleep felt like bliss to her at the moment. Come on, Mito. She heard the low muffled yells from her little sister, accompanying it the loud knocks. She felt a little sloppy as she rose from her comforting bed and quickly searched for her robe, since she still wore her nightgown. She did her best to wipe the sleep from her eyes and she picked up her brush and hairpins and walked out her door. She walked down the hallways and heard the fiddling of a door handle behind. Bathroom. Hearing a low mumble from Naruto. Reaching the door she quickly unlocked it and opened it to find her sister, Emi. She was free from her work attire, and was dressed in casual attire. A red sweater with black pants. Finally, I did say I was coming OV. Her eyes widened in surprise. She followed her gaze to see the blonde in his boxers and t-shirt stumbling into the bathroom. Did you? No. Emi trailed her words as she let herself into her apartment. Mito looked back at her sister in confusion. What are you talking about? She asked, still trying to recover from her sleepiness. Well, one thing, it looks like you slept with him. Emi said bluntly. What? Come on, he's half an inside your place. You still look tired and I thought you were usually dressed by now, Emi continued as she entered her kitchen. It's a bit logical from my point of view. Mito went pale. Don't worry, Mito, I know you're not like that, she cut in as she inspected the bottom cupboards. It is pretty suspicious though, she added. Mito had already figured that out for herself. So tell me about this guy. He popped out of nowhere and you were with him. Mito quickly gathered herself, she still felt a little flustered. She knew that it would go like this. She decided to focus on brushing her hair to tie into her buns. That's quite accurate actually. What do you mean? She heard the flushing of the toilet and the subsequent sink. Exact. Damn, that was awesome, she heard the blonde say loudly. He seemed to have proceeded into the guest room. Emi looked wordlessly at her, Mito giving a sheepish look. They heard a closing of a door and she began talking once again. Not really a person like yourself is he? As she returned to prodding the cupboards. No, Mito admitted. He was far from being eloquent, he didn't really respond to social cues, most of the time. His table manners when he began to eat were atrocious. You don't have any flour, as she ceased her searching. She stood up and walked over to the fridge and inspected briefly. Or any blueberries. I forgot, Mito replied. She recalled that she was supposed to go get some more yesterday. Emi had a knowing look, no doubt to talk about the blonde. So what was that about him not knowing his own name? She asked. He has amnesia, and about before, he really did appear out of nowhere, Mito replied. Now that she thought about it, did the kunai had any sort of correlation with it? You're doing it again, interrupting her thought process. Doing what? That face you always do when you're interested in something. She had odd smile on her, along with mischievous sparkle in her eyes. So someone has caught your attention, huh? Now that's fascinating. And, Mito felt a little defiant, but she certainly wouldn't let her little sister see the heat that was starting to form around her cheeks. And you're not feeling bad? I thought you were interested in Hashirama. He's a clan leader and a powerful shinobi, she prodded. Mito sighed. She always began to get like this whenever romance was involved. She always insisted on finding someone, saying that she deserved to have happiness. Mito was perfectly content on taking her time. Rushing through things wasn't exactly her way of doing things. She tried to formulate a reasonable response to answer her sister. It's because he has amnesia, huh? Well, she didn't quite know how to respond to that. Admit it, you think he's far more interesting than the god of shinobi, right? Mito heard the door swing open. Emi, he's still inside, she whispered to her. Still, she found herself agreeing with her sister. It was quite petty, but the way she met Naruto far exceeded the way her and Hashirama met. Fine, fine, the blonde quickly made his way to where they were. Yo, morning Mito, and Emi right? She gave her greetings and her sister carefully eyed him. Morning to you too, her little sister replied. Right, I remember my name now, it's Naruto, he replied. Mito could almost feel the energy that poured off him, from every word he said. Energetic and almost carelessly. Oh really? It's nice to meet you, a fitting name considering the amount of ramen you ate yesterday. Oh yeah, that was some amazing ramen yesterday. Not really as good as Ichiraku's though. Mito quickly turned her entire attention towards the blonde at the new information. Ichiraku. The young blue-eyed man turned to her. Huh, he scratched his head thoughtfully. No idea where that came from. Guess it's another ramen stand or something, Emi suggested. Also don't let Kenji know you said that, she added. Oh man, if that Ichiraku's is better, then I want some of that ramen, he replied. He can get really serious about his noodles, Emi whispered. Mito ignored this and prioritized to see if he recalled his memories. Anything else Naruto? Voicing her thoughts. He looked at the ceiling as he contemplated. Nah, nothing, he finished. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Emi raise her brow. Hey Naruto, Emi questioned, capturing both the individual's attention. You're a guest, so can you do us a favor? Yeah sure, what is it? He replied without hesitation. Emi dug into her wallet and pulled out some Ryo. Can you go get some flour and blueberries for us? Emi quickly explained where the nearest grocery store was located. Mito knew what she wanted to do. Emi wanted to have some girl time and talk about the blonde that slept over. No problem. Giving a salute, he quickly put on his sandals. Naruto, you really don't have to do this, Mito voiced. It's alright, this is easy stuff, he waved and proceeded outside without any further arguments from her. The door slammed shut, effectively leaving her alone with her sister. She didn't like the boy talk. Well, I have to say, Emi started to speak. He just went out there without even asking why. Mito did have to agree, it revealed something about his character. Although the specifics weren't clear, was a no questions type of guy. Which was something typical of a shinobi. Or did he simply do this because he wanted to help? Regardless of the importance. Well, there's that look again, effectively bring her out of her contemplation. What look? Mito asked. She thought about how her expression changed. Was it noticeable? Or subtle? You really do want to know everything about him, don't you? Her sister questioned, effectively starting her. What Mito felt like it was interrogation. What are you talking about? Face it, you lit up like a child seeing sweets when he said, Ichiraku. Once again she was at a loss of what to say. He has amnesia, I want to help him. Sure, but mostly for your own self-interest. It reminded Mito of what Naruto had said yesterday, and how he easily saw through her facade. It made sense for her sister, since they known each other for their entire lives. Except he was able to do that hardly an hour after they officially met. So how did your date end yesterday? It wasn't a date. I don't see anything romantic between bowls of ramen and sitting side by side, Mito retorted. Yeah, it's mostly done when you're comfortable with one another or between friends, Mito reflected on this. With his warm chakra, she did feel incredibly calm and comfortable around him. It was a little odd. But you're not friends, and that totally was a date, Mito sighed. Why do you insist? She asked. She already knew of the answer. Emi wanted her big sister to be happy. Emi ignored this and continued. Well, did you flirt with him? And him with you? She asked. No, she said unconvincingly. She reflected on yesterday, the comments they had made to each other. She definitely wasn't one for dating. He did say, I have beautiful laugh and that I was a nice person, among other things. There you go. That was flirting. Mito asked. Yeah, obviously, Emi replied. Mito looked at her sister. This realization hit Mito like a ton of bricks. How could she have been so oblivious to it? There were sure told signs that he was. Even she had returned the mutual courtesy. But, to her, it didn't really feel like he was just flirting. It sounded more like he was just stating the obvious. Just absolute genuine comments, at least she felt that way about it. He didn't seem to be the deceiving type, despite being a shinobi. You were flirting with him too, weren't you? Yes, she said quietly. He wondered if he knew about it. Did he know that he was flirting? He couldn't is oblivious to it. Worse of all, they were supposed to go on another date today. The thing was, she was greatly looking forward to it. Naruto sat on the chair of the bakery shop. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something felt familiar about this place. He'd never been here before, obviously. Perhaps it was the bakery shop. Or the smell of the place. He decided to wave it away and focus on the beautiful red-haired woman that sat across from him. When he had came back from helping them with their shopping, Emmy had said goodbye and proceeded on her way. He thought that at least they had something to do that involved eating what he had bought. Instead, Emmy had simply said that it was later and she had forgotten something. Mito had looked nervous at that time for some odd reason as well. She seemed to had gathered herself since they had arrived. So, why we're here again? He asked her. She had this curiosity that was almost impossible to be rid of in her eyes. She always looked at him like that. He wondered if it was simply because he was suffering from amnesia, like he was a game, but there was also genuine worry with it. This time she had a playful and a bit childish look in her pupil-less black eyes. Because you owe me cinnamon buns, he raised his brows. What? They have a delectable taste. Right. I still owe you for buying me ramen, he smiled in amusement. He felt a little nudge in the back of his head. Like he should be remembering this for some reason. Even though it was impossible since he never met the woman before yesterday. By this time the waiter came by and quickly came and dropped off the cinnamon buns. Prior to this, she had already paid for it with his money. The shop itself was very homey. It seemed to be built for comfort as they sat on large comfortable seats and there was tall dividers that separated each table for privacy. He watched as the woman known as Mito picked off a bun and took a careful bite off the treats. She closed her eyes and slightly moaned in pleasure as she did. He chuckled and she seemed to remember that she wasn't alone. A cute light blush flashed across her cheeks and she wiped her face with a napkin. I got carried away, she replied embarrassingly, her blush quickly disappearing. Hey, it's all right, it's cute you know, he said. This time a darker blush appeared on her face. Naruto found himself looking at a different colored eyes. There was no sound, and his surroundings seemed to be hazy and unfocused. This girl in front of him wasn't Mito. She had long midnight hair and pale pupil-less lavender-tinted eyes. To Naruto, she was as breathtaking as the red-haired woman. She had a slight happy smile on her face and when they locked eyes for a moment, he found warmth and love and happiness. She looked shyly away and a rose-colored tint appeared on her cheeks. The smile widened slightly. Who is she? Naruto thought to himself. Her pink, inviting and luscious lips moved but no sound came out. She brought a cinnamon to her mouth and took a small bite. Is this what felt familiar? Naruto, Mito said questionably. He found himself looking in black pupil-less eyes. A different color and different emotions replaced the lavender eyes. Curiosity etched in her eyes but concern was more prevalent. I just remembered something, that's all, composing himself as he replied. Can I ask what? Yeah, there was someone who seemed to have liked cinnamon buns just as much as you did, he smiled at her. It felt right to say, he had said only on a whim but it felt like the truth. I don't remember her name though. He watched her slightly deflate at the new information, her eyes flashed with some disappointment but she still carried a small smile. Her? She asked. What did you remember exactly? He thought about the midnight-haired at what they were doing. Doing what we're doing now. What do you mean? He didn't understand what she meant by that. Sitting here and eating I guess, he replied. I just saw what she looks like a bit. I see, Mito added. Weird, he thought. He grabbed a bun for himself as he looked out the window of the shop. The bakery was located just outside a small park. People enjoying themselves as they walked through along with their families. He thought about the girl in his memory. Those white eyes of hers. He felt like it was a little special than others. Man, all this is so confusing. Where was this person? Did he know other people? Would they freak out when they saw him? So many things. Even if you haven't really promised, thanks for helping try to get my memories back, he said the woman. At least he had some help, a person who wanted to. It meant a lot to him. Like I said, it's interesting, she answered. Taking another bite of her snack. So what do you enjoy doing? He asked, recalling what she had said last night, about getting to know her a little more. She thought about her answer for a few moments. I enjoy studying and learning fuinjutsu, she mentioned to the pale purple diamond-shaped mark on her forehead. This is actually a sealing jutsu. What does it do? He asked. She seemed to get into a trance, showing him that she was a little passionate about it. It's called Strength of 100 Seal, whenever I use a jutsu, which require chakra. I don't have to utilize any of my own. Wow, that's pretty cool. Thinking about jutsu made him get hyped up. Could you show me any of your jutsu? It's what I thought of earlier, perhaps you can remember something if we train together. What kind of training? He asked. I can show you examples of my own ninjutsu, and along with chakra exercises, she seemed to be anticipating as much as he was. Could he remember anything? What excited him most was that he could recall any sort of cool jutsu. I hope it's going to be awesome. I can't wait for it. He wanted to get started right now, screw the cinnamon buns. But I thought perhaps that you would want to visit where you had fallen first, Mito suggested. Alright. He relented. Although training sounded more exciting, he did want to see if anything could come out of it. Why do I get this feeling that I don't belong? While this was far, the blonde commented. Really long too. It's a walk that I enjoy, she proceeded through the meadow. It was relatively quiet, the chirping of bird and the distant waves crashing against the shore was all there was. She took a deep breath of the pleasing aroma while Naruto followed her. Bleg. He burped loudly. Good thing we ate more before we came, he didn't bother apologizing for such rude behavior. She sighed and continued towards the site where he had fallen. You're undefined, Mito commented. Meh. He shrugged her off. She controlled her nerves as they exited the meadow and into another part of the forest. That was a beautiful place though. Indeed, she replied. Naruto was the first person that she had shown the field to. While it didn't hold much significance, it was a pleasant area that helped calm her. Just a place that she could relax in. They hadn't talked much on their near 2-hour journey here, several comments here and there. Although the cerulean-eyed blonde was a little restless, and constantly complained about the time or distance to get here. Is that it? As he paced past her, walking towards the indentation in the ground. The area was in the same state that he had seen him in, leaves and dirt strewn about. He stood directly over the crater while she joined him. Yes, Mito replied. He nodded, and simply glanced around the area before resting his gaze upon the depression. When I found you here, you had these orange markings on the corner of your eyes, she added, hoping to help jumpstart his memory. He inserted his hands into his jacket, and wore a concentrated look on his face. After a minute of silence, he looked up directly into the sky. Nothing's coming for me. He took in a deep breath. I'll be honest. Mito noticed the change in his demeanor. What if I don't remember who I really am? What do you mean? What if I can't remember anything else, and it will never come back? The wild-haired talked. I'm not worried about that though. I just can't stop thinking. He crossed his arms as he continued to stare into the sky. He seemed to try and gather his words. Even if I never recover my memories, could I just, start over? I suppose, but what about your family, or friends? She wasn't entirely sure if she added a significant other. I'm sure you'll recover them. I guess. He didn't sound entirely convinced. It was little odd, before he sounded so sure about himself. Where was this doubt coming from? He exhaled loudly and swung his arms. Maybe if I could remember something if I fell from the sky again, he chuckled, doing a turn around on his personality. He turned around and started the trek back to the meadow. Let's go check out that place again. Okay. And joined him by his side. In their lull of conversation, she was reminded of earlier at bakery. Who was that girl with him? He didn't seem to realize, or ignored, or didn't care that they were sort of on a date. He seemed to had been doing the same with that girl. She didn't bother trying to speculate their relationship. Mito was a little curious as to what she looked like and that perhaps it might lead to a clue, if he recalled anything distinct. She resolved to ask him at a more appropriate time. Making their way to the flower-filled field, he led the way near the central part of the field. He suddenly plopped down on the ground, the grass and any unfortunate flowers bruising away from the weight. Mito looked curiously at the fellow, who was nestled on the ground. Come join me, he said to her, eyes shut closed. I much rather not, she replied. She was a little concerned of dirt potentially getting into her hair. She might be a kunoichi, but she didn't want to get unnecessarily dirty. The most that she would do was to sit down. She sat down a comfortable distance away from him, his outstretched left arm within reach. He peeked with a sideways glance and raised his brow. That's boring, he replied with an annoyed tone of voice. Come on, just lay down and feel amazing. I don't see how that would make me feel spectacular, she retorted. Well, all you see are the clouds rolling by in the sky, the heat on the sun on your skin, he sighed contentedly for a moment. I just feel one with nature, you know, and nothing really matters other than right now, he said softly. She was a bit bewildered from his sudden change in the dynamic of his character. She smiled wistfully. If you say so, she relented to him. She quickly disposed her buns in her hair and the small crown nestled between them. Her hair fell down to her shoulders and placed the items to the side. Is something the matter? Seeing him with an odd look on his face. You really look good like that, you know, she realized that she had been seen without her usual buns. He had completely taken down her guard without her realizing. When did she get so comfortable with him? Thank you, she was able to control the heat. She was still unused to the sincerity in his words. She quickly reasoned that putting her hair but into place would be a little unbecoming. She leaned back and placed her head on the grass. She looked up into the cerulean sky. Some white fluffy clouds hovered over the land. She felt the comfortable heat on her skin and face. She did feel a little calmer actually. She didn't necessarily feel one with nature though. I sort of see what you mean, she said to him. Of course I'm right, he replied confidently. She looked at the blue sky. She was slightly reminded of the blonde's eyes. She turned to him and she saw a content and nostalgic smile on his face. She wondered if he remembered anything at all during his time here. Mito couldn't deny that she was physically attracted to him. He turned to look at her, with his cerulean eyes. Despite his amnesia, it was obvious that he was an honest, virtuous person but also an odd character. She turned to look back up at the sky, and that perhaps, in future she may fall for him. Mito Uzumaki. Naruto looked towards the intrusion in their walk. Two people appeared behind them. One was a long-haired blonde man wearing a metal forehead protector with a leaf symbol. The other man wore the gray Uzumaki clan armor, along with similar band, the only exception was it carried a swirl. Both seemed tired with their rugged appearance, some sweat beating down their faces. We have urgent news, the Uzushiogakure shinobi explained. Yes, what is it? Mito shot a particular look at Naruto, which he easily understood. He relaxed, not paying attention to conversation. It nothing to do with him anyway, a fact that Mito obviously recognized. He also wasn't looking forward to what might happen if he listened in. So he walked a short distance away and examined his surroundings of the village around him. Some children ran across a street, going into a nearby candy store. The sun was hanging low in the sky, a fact that surprised him. Time seemed to have passed quickly today. It had been a week since he had been here. Well, conscious at least. He had gotten to know Mito and Emmy a little more, since he was staying at her place. Nearly every part of the day was spent with Mito. He had merely been shown around the village, escorted by her and Emmy at times. The time they awakened was far too early in his opinion. Apparently, sleeping past 10 in the morning was too tardy. Still, he enjoyed the sights around Uzushiogakure. He had met some of Mito's friends, shinobi and civilians alike. He tried to remember their names, as they were plentiful. They liked to comment on his exotic appearance quite a bit. Some curious glances were always sent his way, as he was a stranger. Other than the Uzumaki clan members, others sent him wary and calculating stares. He also found out that he was actually being kept around Mito because of her skills as a shinobi. Reminded of that fact, they were supposed to find out if he was able to retain any of his skills as a ninja. A coming plan that he was excited for. Mito kept conversing with the duo. He thought briefly on what it was about, but he kept his distance as they spoke in hushed tones. Several times before, he had listened in on Mito's other conversations with her friends. Before he was berated that it was incredibly rude to do so, especially when it was private. He didn't want to get another earful of that again. He sighed as he watched the people move about their business. The fresh look of the buildings around him. It was a little odd, like it's something he wanted to see for a while. He had told Mito of it. Once again she said that it might involve his possible Uzumaki heritage, it seemed to fit enough. He had enjoyed the time he spent with Emi and Mito. He trusted them. Friends.